Hey everyone, welcome to Looking Outside from a different part of the world. We're recording live from Leipzig in Germany at the Rulebreaker Future Congress hosted by To Be Ahead, a foresight organization that's brought together for 2 days some of the most innovative minds in the world in the industry, but particularly highlighting some of the innovation that's happening inside of Germany and startups doing new and interesting things, hence Rulebreaker. So I have the privilege and the honor to be able to do 3 rapid fire podcasts with 3 people doing really interesting things that have appeared as speakers at the Congress, starting with Hamid Noori, who is joining us. Now, this is going to be a little bit quick, so I know that we're not going to be able to cover everything, but I promise in the show notes you'll be able to find all the details about Hamid and everything that he is doing, which is amazing. And what I want to start with is just a quick intro into who you are.
Sure. So I'm Hamid Noori. I'm the CEO of the Cultivated B. I have a very heavy academic background. I started my career in Princeton, ended it at MIT, and I consider myself being a multidisciplinary academic person.
And the Cultivated B does?
The Cultivated Bee is a technology provider in the domain of cellular agriculture. So our main focus and scope is to serve companies, food companies, cosmetic companies, even pharmaceutical companies of different sizes to make the transformation from conventional resource management and supply chain to the world of alternative proteins coming from more sustainable resources with a very specific focus on economical sustainability.
Love that. And many people would say that synthetic biology, particularly in food, but across all those industries, is the future. Is that how you set about starting this company, is feeling like this was where the world was headed, or was it kind of spontaneous?
I do not have a food background, and I wasn't imagining a future that involves food technology. I consider just a problem being very exciting and interesting. There was a lot of laboratory work conducted already that indicated that it should be possible to generate proteins, peptides, and other ingredients for food coming from different sources than animal sources. Mm-hmm. And I felt that this is an exciting topic to take those to scalable level and actually make them something that could be entering the real market instead of just something that stays in the laboratory.
Mm. And, when you say scalable, that's a really important part of the innovation process. I mean, that's kind of what the end goal is to help to maybe replace some of the mainstream solutions that we have right now. But cellular agriculture, particularly in food, has been growing like quite fast. Obviously, it's been around for a long time, but in the last 10 years, we've seen 10 startups now to 200 startups. So a lot more investment, but it's still fairly niche. So do you think this is a long game and a slow play?
Maybe we need to look at it terminologically slightly different. Cellular agriculture is a huge field, right? There are subdomains of it that are actually already in the market and successfully, and we make money with that. And there are subdomains that may need longer time, given regulatory hurdles, but also apparently I am guilty that it is taking time. So we divide cellular agriculture into 4 domains, right? One domain is the cultivated meat domain that is going to take its time for various reasons. We have precision fermentation in microorganisms. This domain already is serving food industry. We have molecular farming, which is essentially the same as precision fermentation, just conducted in plants. We are among the front runners in that discipline. And then we have the entirely just tech-based area of it, which is about what hardware you need to put into place so that these things happen. While that is less the agricultural part of it in that sense, but in the same way as a company may make a harvesting machine for the fields, and that relates to agriculture, making bioreactors for the cellular agriculture belongs to that domain in a natural way as well. But I separate that because that's a completely different mindset that you need to make that.
And you just listed a ton of different applications.
Correct.
So what problem were you hoping to solve when you started the company?
we started for one reason. I actually was approached to analyze whether cultivated meat has future. And
What's the answer?
well, my answer 5 years ago was don't come close to me. The main issue was that I saw that there was a lot of information around, but there were certain bottlenecks that simply were not solved yet, right? And a lot of people were over-promising stuff of, oh, yeah, it is all doable, and if I just do this and that, and if I would get a penny every time when these things happen, I would genuinely be a billionaire. The main thing that we recognized, and that became our company, was there are these bottlenecks, and I realized that everyone is going to get stuck at exactly the same bottlenecks. So we formed the company as a tech provider to solve only those bottlenecks. The logic, and I mentioned it today as well, was when everyone is running after the gold rush, it's an exciting time to sell shovels and jeans. And I like doing that. I like making shovels. And so the challenges that they were confronted with in those times were, in contrast to pharmaceutical industry that has a long history of using cell culture to make drugs, there is no standardized cell line. There is no standards. There were actually no standards for anything. It was the wild west of research. Everyone was claiming something and doing something. So there were no clear cell lines. Cell culture medium was incredibly expensive, and us actually also, in those times, it was still fashionable to use fetal bovine serum, which changed over time. And then also there was the topic of how do you get all these things actually run in a bioreactor? How do you actually run cell cultures at a cheaper price inside the bioreactor? Pharmaceutical industry doesn't have that problem because the margins for them are very big. Food industry normally has margins around 5 to 10%. They cannot afford having very expensive processes and clean rooms in place. Things need to be simplified. And so these we realized are the bottlenecks, and we started working on them.
Okay. There's one thing, because you're obviously what you're doing is very sophisticated and very well thought through, and like the problems that you're trying to solve as almost like a supplier of these companies that are enabling it. That's all clear. There is one thing that you mentioned on a panel today, which I thought was really interesting about the way that you run your business and the way that you approach it as the leader of the organization.
Oops.
Which was, there's actually two things that you said that I felt were not contradictory, but interesting dichotomies. So one thing you said was you have to do what makes you happy. So obviously you have to get passion out of what you're doing. The other was there's challenges that you're coming up against every single day, and every day is like a firefight that you have to put out. So I guess what I'm wondering is, are you happy having a challenge?
A life without challenge is boring. As I incorporated the company, I had a colleague who asked me, how is my mindset? And I said, look, I feel like we are like the Marine recons, a bunch of crazy guys that you just drop behind enemy lines and hope they reach the goal and actually capture it. Challenges are also exciting. There are certain type of challenges that genuinely don't make me happy, right? Discussions with regulatory offices, or just basic discussions on administrative topics. You have challenges on all domains when you run a company. They also exist, and they are not something exciting or interesting. But it is genuinely a challenge how you make out of a device that was developed in 1970s, a device that is meant for the 21st century. It's a very difficult problem and a really fun one to solve, right? So if that is your job, and I disagree a little bit with younger generations. I feel myself being a bit older than some. I don't necessarily need a very big purpose for these things. That's what keeps me going, because if you need that purpose, sometimes it becomes very difficult. But I get my happiness from the fact that there are big problems and we manage to solve them. As a matter of fact, many of those topics that I mentioned were challenges. We solved them already, and that was happy. That was a great moment for us. And now We are trying to really transform bioreactors from something that was genuinely starting in 1970s and bring them to the 21st century where the price is going to fall. This I can tell you. By the end of this year, it is going to really change how bioreactors are even being used or priced, etc. And that's a fun thing to work on. Is it challenging? Hell yes. Does it make me cry? Sometimes, but I like doing it.
Yeah, well, and thankfully, as you said today, you have like a cheerleader at home that helps you to work
I do.
through all of the emotional turmoil of that. Okay, so we're going to get closer to reaching scale. It's going to become much more affordable. What's the negative consequence of what you're doing?
Quite often people think that what we are doing has negative consequence for traditional agriculture. I vehemently disagree with that. As a matter of fact, we introduced molecular farming at scale just because we care for the farmers, because we see that the farmers would get more value. Everyone would get more value. Like it reduces the CO2 footprint. The farmers are going to get more premium on exactly the same that they were cultivating. And the final users get really more sustainable, also economically. When I say economically sustainable, means the price tag of today doesn't change tomorrow by fivefold just because more people are consuming it. And that's part of the scalability topic. Now, there are, however, as any other innovation, negative sides that always come. And these negative sides are often more emotional of nature than realistic. The first time cars came, maybe people were missing their horses. And feeling bad that I am losing touch to my heritage. All my family were great horse riders. Now there is a car. The first time telephones came, people felt that it is going to reduce human contact, and it was actually facilitating it to in many degrees. The same applies to internet. So I cannot exactly pinpoint to you what could be the problem. What we have solved is that there is no toxicity, there is no allergenicity, so there will be no medical consequences for it. And actually, I believe this will lead to democratization of food. As a matter of fact, I didn't get the chance to say it today because no one asked me, but I think the future of these things is rather in Africa than in Europe.
Because of the growth, the development of the country, the growth of the population, the innovation that's happening there? Anything else?
All these factors,
Yeah.
and because old people normally are risk averse. And we have aging population in Europe, whereas we have very young, very enthusiastic population in Africa that is just craving for growth. And I believe that this is the domain. Now, what challenges and what negative side effects all these future trends may bring, it remains to be seen. But I don't think innovation should be stopped just because we are afraid.
Yeah, of course. Well, there's fear and then there's carefulness. And I think a lot of what you touched on was a shared sentiment at the Congress that there is a hesitation to change, or it's framed sometimes as unwillingness to change. But you seemed a lot more pragmatic, I think, than a lot of other people that were speaking throughout the Congress, in that you understand things need to reach the masses, they need to be communicated in a certain way. You gave that analogy of marketing a 1930s car. So change management is also just meeting people where they are and doing that with empathy.
Yes. And I think this last word is the most important thing. We are doing these things for people, right? If you are doing it for people, you need to put yourselves in their shoes and understand what is the cause of that hesitation. Now, I mentioned aging population is always more hesitant, almost independent of the reasoning. It is just the way humans are. But in general, there are many reasons why the general public is also hesitant to try out new things. That's also part of human nature. That's part of our survival mechanism, to just not try everything new because those things can kill us. And understanding those things, trying to inform well, but also trying to pick up the people there where they are. Don't try, this has always been in my life, my philosophy. Don't try to change people. If you want to communicate with them, communicate in their language. If you try to change the people, you're either an arrogant person. I'm being filmed.
You can swear on the show, yeah.
So or you're just completely detached from reality. And I don't think I'm any of those two. I think we are doing these things for a reason. We want to actually help humanity to have better resources. I mentioned today personalized nutrition. That could be a perspective. But also generally, we are already seeing supply chain problems due to climate change, right? And if we want our next generations to be in the luxury to enjoy the same goods as we have enjoyed, then we need to find a way to give it to them, maybe coming from different sources. To do that, you need to convince, and that not arrogantly, but through information and also through really empathically looking at what are the concerns and address them. I felt many times when I talked to co-entrepreneurs that they were critical of regulatory bodies because they felt they were very strict. But admittedly, the European one is called European Food Safety Authority. They are not judging the scientific quality of your work. They are judging whether you're going to kill people. And actually, that's legitimate, right? And I think this is a good thing. If you work well with them, if you already take farmers into the game and try to, there are circular bioeconomy approaches, etc., so that you can generate a win-win. You need to just be conscious what you want to do. If that's your goal, that you want to take everyone along, then you already need to think about it and do it in the right way. That's what we try to do. We are not always successful, and most certainly we are also not the smartest on planet. So I'm looking forward to be taught better.
Yeah, well, you mentioned that today as well, that, self-doubt is a part of being a great leader, and it links to humility and openly understanding where, you don't know what you don't know, and you're still learning, and you might have some things wrong, and maybe there are consequences that you're not seeing yet, but you're open and curious.
Just look back at your own life. Because I do that quite often. And almost every decision that I made as a teen, definitely every decision I made as a teenager was wrong. And a lot, or maybe I would have done it slightly different. And, that's the whole point, that you are always, even if you're doing your very best, you're doing your very best in that particular moment, given the very specific context of the time and the environment. That, however, means when the context changes, when the environment changes, your decisions and your way of looking at it may change. One of the most beautiful things that I ever read was that if you read the same book at different ages, you may read a different book, actually. And there is almost no difference, right? So we are not perfect. We are doing your very best, given the current circumstances that we have as knowledge, as well as our understanding of our environment. Any one of these can change. Definitely our knowledge will advance and question many things that we are assuming right now being appropriate.
Yeah, I love that. And, there are many things that we can't change, but if we could change something in line with the theme of rule breaker, which rule would you break?
I constantly break rules. With respect to food?
Sure. Yeah, or the industry that you're in.
I would let people also try. We are, I have an 11-month-old son, and I realize you need to let him fall on his behind as well to learn when he's trying to stand up. If you really try to predict everything that can go wrong from day one, and I'm not referring to you eating food and dying of it, that is definitely not. But there are various things where we can be a little bit more explorative and a little bit more open to experimentation. And also, this is not breaking rules, but since we started our business in Europe, I see the difference in mentality between North America and Europe. We need to accept that failure is fine. Just failing is part of doing business. Because I have the feeling a lot of people who are entrepreneurs in Europe are afraid of just failing, right? And that has become an unspoken rule. You are not allowed to fail. Well, if that is a rule that I can break, then I break that one. I'm okay with failing. If you don't fall on your behind, you will not learn to stand.
You can't learn without making some mistakes.
Yes.
Or breaking some rules.
Absolutely.
Great advice. Love that. Hamid, thank you so much for taking the
My
time.
pleasure.